hereby loved him. That's just the way it was.
I need somebody to come out to my house. I think my fiance is dead.
She says, you know what? There's something I've never shared with law enforcement ever before today that I remember.
Corey Wienerker was 25 years old, a bartender in a small Iowa town. One night in 1992, he left work and was beaten to death. The woman who killed him was the woman he had been secretly seeing. She thought she got away with it. For 27 years, she did. To understand how a secret that old finally broke open, we have to go back to West Liberty, Iowa, and the man everyone there seemed to know. The dog is unchained. That is the first wrong thing. Jody pulls into the driveway of the farmhouse west of West Liberty on the evening of October 13, 1992. She is 22 years old, Corey Wienerker's fiancée, and she has come home from work the same way she always does. The routine of it is exactly what makes the interruption so sharp. The dog is loose. He should not be. She looks at the yard. Corey's Cadillac sits in its usual spot, unmoved since the night before, since he came home from his shift at Wink's bar. The car being there means Corey is inside. That should mean everything is ordinary. It does not feel ordinary. The dog circles the car, agitated, not settling. She goes inside. The door is unlocked. The house is quiet, in a way that houses are not usually quiet. Not the quiet of sleep, not the quiet of an empty room, something heavier than that. She moves through it, past the kitchen, toward the back. She finds him. She does not scream. Corey Wienerker, 22 years old, a bartender at Wink's bar in West Liberty, is on the floor of their bedroom. She touches him. He is cold. Not the cold of a window left open, a different kind of cold. He is not moving. He is not breathing. What does wrong look like? Before you know what it is, it looks like a dog running loose. It looks like a car sitting too still. It looks like skin under your hand that should be warm and is not. She picks up the phone. "Hi," she says. Her voice is controlled, fractured but controlled, the way voices go when the body is still processing what the hands already know. "I need somebody to come out to my house. I think my fiancé dead." The dispatcher asks why she believes that. "Because he's all sweaty," she says, "and he's not breathing, and he's cold." There is no hysteria in those words. There is something harder, the flat precision of someone reporting facts her mind has not yet named as grief. She does not say murdered. She does not say attacked. She gives the dispatcher what she has: cold. Not breathing, not moving. First responders arrive. They confirm what she already knows. Corey is dead. The house is silent, in the specific way a house is silent when someone is gone from it permanently. The kind of silence that settles into the walls. Officers move through the rooms, and the rooms give nothing back. Nobody in that farmhouse on October 13, 1992 yet asks the question that will take 27 years to answer. They do not ask who. They do not know they should. They are not wrong to assume the answer will come quickly. West Liberty is a town of 3,000 people. Everybody knows everybody's name. They are wrong about how long the knowing will take. It will take 27 years. 24 hours before Jody picked up the phone, Corey Wienerker was behind the bar, laughing. It was October 12, 1992. Wink's bar sat on the main drag in West Liberty, Iowa, a small town of 3,000 people where everybody knew your name and most of your business. Corey was 23 years old and built like someone who worked hard and ate well. He had dark hair, an easy grin, and the kind of laugh that pulled a whole room toward him. He was good at this job. Not just pouring drinks, though he was good at that too. He remembered names. He remembered what people ordered last time. He remembered the kid you mentioned a few weeks back, and he asked how she was doing, and he meant it. In a town like West Liberty, that kind of attention was its own currency. Corey had a life taking shape around him. He was engaged to Jody, a young woman he had met in the ordinary way people meet in small towns. Gradually, then all at once. They had the farmhouse west of town. They had plans, the kind of plans that sound simple from the outside. A wedding, maybe kids, a life built out of ordinary days. He had a mother who came to Winks most mornings. Her name was Susan Winnicky. She was a regular, the kind of regular who has her own stool and does not need to be asked what she wants. She and Corey had developed a ritual, the way families do. Not announced, just arrived at. At the end of every shift, Corey would find his mother before he left. He would put his arms around her and say 4 words. Mom, I love you. He said it the way you say things you mean completely, not perform.
He didn't care if they called him a mama's boy or anything. He didn't care. He would always come down to the end of bar and give me a hug and tell me, Mom, I love you.
Performing it, not making it a moment. Just saying it, because it was true, and it was end of shift, and that was what you did. Stop for a moment. Think about what it means to be the person who gets those 4 words last. To be the one he always found at the end. Susan Winnicky did not know, on October 12, 1992, that she was receiving the last version of that goodbye. Nobody ever knows which goodbye is the last one. That is the particular cruelty this case carries. Corey left Winks that evening. He drove out to the farmhouse west of town. The door was unlocked. In West Liberty, doors were unlocked. That was just how it was. People trusted the town, and the town trusted them back. Nobody thought twice about an open door or a dog left to roam. By the evening of October 13, Jody would pull into that same driveway and find the dog unchained. First responders would confirm what she already knew. The phone in the farmhouse bedroom would ring, and no one would pick it up again. The phone rang through the morning of October 13, 1992. Nobody answered it. By the time officers reached the farmhouse west of West Liberty, the silence inside had already said enough. The bedroom tells investigators everything they need to know and nothing they want to hear. Corey Wienicke lay on the bedroom floor. He had suffered blunt force trauma. The fatal wound ran ear to ear. Local and state investigators moved through the room carefully, cataloging what they saw and what they did not see. What they did not see mattered just as much. No drawers pulled open, no ransacked shelves, no overturned furniture. The house was intact, orderly, undisturbed, except for the man on the floor. This is what the evidence said. First, the violence here was not random. A stranger who panics takes things. A burglar who is interrupted makes a mess and runs. This scene had none of that. Every corner of the farmhouse was untouched. The television was still there. Valuables were still there. Whoever came through that unlocked door was not looking for money or anything Corey owned. They came because of Corey himself. Investigators documented the wound. Blunt force, deliberate, applied with enough force to be final. No sign of hesitation. The violence ran its complete course inside that bedroom, and then it stopped. The killer walked out and left Corey on the floor. The farmhouse was the quietest it had ever been. Jody had found him the evening before. She had made the 911 call. She had answered the dispatcher's questions through the fog of shock. Now the farmhouse
I need somebody to come out to my house. I think my fiance is dead.
Did not want Corey's things. They only wanted Corey dead. The yellow tape went up across the driveway in the gray October morning. Voices and radio static cut through the air on the law enforcement side. On the other side, it was just people standing and waiting. Susan Winnicky arrived and stopped at the tape. She had said goodbye to her son 2 nights ago. End of shift. The way they always did. She had hugged him and heard those 4 words. She did not know it was the last time. Hardware. Grief does not wait for procedure, but procedure does not move for grief. The tape holds against a mother the same way it holds against anyone, without explanation, without apology. She stood and watched figures move through the house, where Corey was still on the floor. Inside. The scene was deliberate, specific, personal. Someone knew that farmhouse, someone knew Corey Wienicke and came to that bedroom with a defined purpose. The question investigators could not yet answer was the simplest one. Who hated Corey Wienicke enough to do this? Within days, someone would come forward with what looked like an answer. The investigators did not find the murder weapon. A reporter did. The tip came in on October 14, 1992. A local reporter had spotted something in the ditch along the roadside near the farmhouse. A bat, discarded in plain view with dried blood on it. Not buried, not thrown deep into a field, just lying there, as if whoever left it had not been afraid, or had not stopped long enough to think about what came next. Investigators recovered the bat and sent it for processing. Before the lab results came back, a nearby farmer provided something more useful, a fixed point in time. He had driven past that stretch of road at 9 in the morning on October 13. The ditch was clear. He drove the same road again later that afternoon. The bat was there. That testimony compressed the murder window to 4 hours, 9 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon on October 13, 1992. That 4-hour window was now the frame around everything. The lab confirmed the blood type on the bat matched Corey's. The weapon was real. The connection was documented. And then came a second result that changed the direction of the investigation entirely. No fingerprints. The bat that killed Corey Wienerker was wiped clean, which means someone had the presence of mind to wipe it. That detail deserves weight. After the violence ended, someone took the time. They cleaned the weapon. They carried it out of the farmhouse, walked to the roadside, and set it in the ditch. A panicked person leaves a mess. A person in flight leaves a trail. This left neither. That is a person still thinking, still making choices, still controlling what they left behind. The killer walked away calmly. That was the evidence. And for now, the evidence was not enough. Investigators verified Jody's alibi. She had been at work from 9 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon on October 13. Co-workers confirmed it. The timeline confirmed it. She had been nowhere near that farmhouse during those 4 hours. She was cleared. What cleared Jody did not resolve anything. It narrowed the field and sharpened the question. If she did not kill Corey, then someone else did. Someone who knew the farmhouse well enough to enter it without breaking anything. Someone who knew his schedule well enough to choose those 4 hours. Someone whose reason was specific enough to bring a weapon and controlled enough to clean it before walking away. That person had not been questioned. They had not been named. As of October 14, investigators did not know who they were looking for. Within days, that person would solve that problem for them. They would walk into the police station without being asked. She was not called in. She came herself. And that is the first thing investigators would remember about Annette Hazen. She was 29 years old when she walked into the police station in October 1992. She asked to speak with investigators about Corey Wienerker. She sat down across the table and she talked. The interview room was small and plain. A table, chairs, a window that let in flat light. Annette sat on the other side of the table from investigators, and she did not fidget. She had come here voluntarily. She had things to say. The first thing she told them was that she and Corey had been having an affair. An ongoing relationship, she said, separate from his engagement to Jody. She offered this unprompted. She framed it as context, as something investigators needed to understand about Corey's life. She was helpful. She was open. She answered questions with the ease of someone who had nothing to hide. Investigators listened. They wrote down what she said. They noted that she had come to them before they came to her. This is what made her useful and what made her dangerous. She volunteered information no one had asked for. She knew about the affair because she was in it. She knew about the farmhouse because she had been there. She was telling investigators things that would eventually point directly at her. And she was doing it with a straight face. She came to them. Let that sit for a moment. The person who was at that farmhouse walked into the police station and sat down. Nobody summoned her. Nobody had named her. She simply showed up and started talking. And then she told them something else. She said she had stopped by the farmhouse on the morning of October 13. She had a reason for being there, she explained. A borrowed book she wanted to return. She drove out that morning. She stood at the door and waited. I stopped by that morning. I knocked, but nobody came to the door, she said. So she left. That was her account. She knocked, no one answered, and she drove away. She had placed herself at Corey's door, inside the murder window. And then she had explained it away with a borrowed book and an unanswered knock. Investigators wrote it down. The pen scratched across the paper and recorded what she had said. She sat across the table, still composed, still cooperative. She was still the woman who had come in on her own to help. The room was very quiet. Annette had just told investigators she was standing at Corey's door on the morning he died. She said no one answered. She said she left. For 25 years, investigators would not be able to prove otherwise. Wendy Marshall was 20 years old, and she was there. What she saw in the parking lot of Wink's bar at 2 in the morning would take years to matter, but it would not be forgotten. This is what she saw. Wink's bar at closing on the night of October 12, 1992. The lights coming up, the last customers moving toward the door. And Annette Hazen already sitting in Corey's car in the parking lot, waiting. Corey walked out of Wink's that night alongside Wendy. It was an ordinary exit at the end of a shift. The bar door swung open, and 2 people came through it together. Annette watched from the car. She saw who stepped out, and she saw who stepped out with him. In a town of 3,000 people, that moment was not invisible. Whatever she thought she saw, it was enough. The parking lot was lit by headlights and the flat glow from the bar's exterior. Annette got out of the car. The October air was cold and still. The argument began in the parking lot, moved into the car, and then spilled back out onto the roadside. Annette reached for the door handle while the car was still moving. Corey stopped the car. They stood together on the roadside in the dark. 2 in the morning, voices carrying into the empty road. Wendy Marshall heard what she heard. She saw what she saw. She would carry it for years before anyone in authority wrote it down. The argument had a specific shape. Annette told Corey that she meant nothing to him. She said it the way people say things they need to hear answered. The words, as Wendy later recalled them, "I'm nothing to you." Corey answered her, "You're not nothing to me. I love you." He told her he loved her. That is the last thing Corey Wienicke ever said to Annette Hazen. The argument wound down in the cold. 2 people stood at the edge of that road in the early hours of October 13. They had reached the end of something neither of them named. Whatever Annette had felt when she watched that bar door open, Corey had answered it with kindness. That was the man he was. That was the last kindness he had available to give. They got back in the car. Annette went home. Corey drove back to the farmhouse west of West Liberty. The night closed over the town. No disturbance, no alarm, no neighbor woke to any sound. West Liberty settled into the dark the way it always did. 8 hours later, Corey Wienicke was dead, and Annette Hazen was already on her way to the police station to help. She had told investigators her version of October 13. She had placed herself at the farmhouse door and walked out with a straight face. Now they needed to understand who she was before the murder and how long Corey Wienicke had been at the center of everything. Who was Annette Hazen before October 13, 1992, and how long had she been watching him? At the time of the murder, she was recently divorced. She was living at the Hazen farmhouse, a rural property near West Liberty. She was working sporadic bar shifts. She spent her evenings at Wink's. She was drinking heavily. Her world had contracted to a very small radius, and inside that radius, at the fixed center of it, was Corey. The Hazen farmhouse sat in rural Iowa the way a life does when it has stopped moving outward. There were no new plans, no trajectory pointing away. Annette had been moving through the days in a kind of circuit. The bar, the farmhouse, the bar again. Everything she did pointed back to one person. People at Wink's had noticed. The attachment was not subtle. It was not the kind of feeling that hides itself in a crowd. Bar regulars had seen it. Annette's attention fixed on Corey in a way that went only one direction. She believed they had a future. She believed the affair was the beginning of something larger. She believed Corey would leave Jody. She had believed this for a long time. The belief had become the frame of her daily life. He would not. He was engaged. He had a life and a woman he had come home to every night. The roadside argument had given Annette the answer she did not want. He loved her in a way that would not rearrange his life. He had told her she was not nothing to him. He had not said she was everything. What do you do when you can see exactly why someone did it, and you still cannot prove it? That is where investigators found themselves. They could map Annette's world. They could see the obsession in the shape of her days. The farmhouse, the bar shifts, the affair, the argument 8 hours before the murder. Her own words were already in the record. They had heard her say she knocked and nobody answered. They could hear the outline of a lie they could not crack. The motive was clear. The evidence was not. Investigators knew what Annette felt. They knew where she had been. They knew what she had said the night before Corey died. None of it was enough to charge her. The case was about to go quiet, and Annette Hazen was about to go on with her life. The case had not closed. The investigation had gone quiet, and Annette Hazen was still free to move through the world. Then came October 22. On October 22, 1992, she agreed to take the polygraph. She sat down for it like someone with nothing to hide. The room held the equipment, the examiner, and Annette. She was composed, cooperative, exactly as she had been 9 days before when she walked in on her own. The polygraph measures physiological response, pulse, breath, the conductivity of skin under stress. It is a tool, and tools produce results, and the result that morning showed no indications of deception. Clean readout, clear numbers, nothing flagged. The examiner noted no deception. Investigators watched it come back clean. She had sat in that room with everything they knew about her, the affair, the obsession, the argument on the roadside, the borrowed book, and the unanswered knock. She had sat through the polygraph, and she had passed. The result was in the file. The instrument said she was telling the truth. The investigators knew what they knew. Those two things sat side by side in that same room and would not reconcile. She passed. The woman who killed Corey Wienicke sat in that room and passed. Then there was Jackie Hazen. Jackie Hazen arrived with documents. She produced a doctor's appointment notice and store receipts. The documents placed Annette in Iowa City throughout the murder window on October 13. A medical appointment. Dated receipts from Iowa City stores. The documentation matched the timeline. It matched the 4-hour window. It placed Annette somewhere other than the farmhouse west of West Liberty at the time Corey Wienicke was killed. Investigators were staring at the right person. The right person now had a clean polygraph result. And she had a paper trail that said she was somewhere else entirely. The documents went onto the table. The receipts, the appointment notice. They formed the quiet pile, dated, flat, impossible to argue with using the tools the law makes available. The room held the kind of silence that follows when an investigation runs out of road. Motive documented, polygraph clean, alibi corroborated. The case had nowhere left to go. It did not close. It simply stopped. Annette walked out of the police station that day with a clean result and a corroborated alibi. The investigators had built the picture. The picture was complete, and they could not use it. The case file sat in West Liberty. It would sit there for years, untouched, waiting for something the law had not yet given them. And somewhere in that town, the person who killed Corey Wienicke woke up the next morning like anyone else. The file sat. The investigation did not reopen in any meaningful way. What it did instead was exhaust itself in one final, wide effort before going quiet for good. 400 people were asked what they knew about the night Corey Wienicke died, and still the answer did not come. Over 4 to 6 months, investigators worked through West Liberty and the surrounding area. They knocked on doors. They sat across tables. They followed the leads that emerged and recorded the ones that went nowhere. A town of 3,000 people accounts for its residents quickly. Then the questions reach outward, into the county, into neighboring towns, into anyone who might have known Corey or Annette or known anything at all. Eventually, those questions run out too. Susan Winicky lived through all of it. She had stood outside the tape in October. She had waited through the winter. The investigation gave her nothing in November, nothing in December. The new year arrived and the questions continued. There was still no name she could put to the loss. West Liberty is the kind of town that talks. It had talked. Roughly 400 interviews meant roughly 400 conversations. 400 rooms where someone sat down and said what they knew, what they had heard, or what they guessed. The leads narrowed, then they stopped. The information did not stop coming. The useful information did. 400 interviews, 400 doors opened, and the one that mattered was never knocked on. There was a farmhouse near West Liberty, the Hazen farmhouse. Annette had lived there during the months of the investigation. From the outside, it was unremarkable. Just a house in rural Iowa. On weekends, neighborhood kids came and slept over. They did the things children do in houses that belong to adults. They ate, and they talked, and they listened. Something was said in that house. The investigation did not know to look there. By April 1993, the case was officially cold. The interviews had stopped. The leads had stopped. The file remained open. Cases like this do not get formally closed. They get set aside. No one was actively working it. The farmhouse where Corey died sat in the record as one location among many. The Hazen farmhouse was a peripheral detail that no one had examined closely. It sat in the record like any other name, any other address. Susan Winicky was still in West Liberty, still waiting in a town that had tried everything it could and come up empty. The kids who had slept over at the Hazen farmhouse were growing up. One of them had heard something. It would take years before anyone thought to ask. 24 years after the case went cold, a name came up in a hospital corridor, and it stopped everything. December 2017. Agent Trent Velita was at the University of Iowa Hospital in Iowa City, working a case unrelated to anything that happened in West Liberty in 1992. He was not looking for Corey Wienicke. He had never heard the name. He was moving through a routine day when a hospital worker, someone he knew from previous work, stopped him in the corridor. They had exchanged information before on matters unrelated to this. On this particular day, the worker had something different. Not a file from the case he came here for, a name and a story attached to it. The worker described an old murder. West Liberty, 1992. A man named Corey Wienicke, killed in October of that year. The investigation had reached 400 people, run for months, and come up empty. The case went cold by April 1993. No arrest, no trial, no resolution. The kind of case that sits in a filing system, listed as open but untouched for decades. Velita listened. He was good at listening. The most significant information rarely signals its own arrival. It turns up sideways, in a building you came to for something else entirely. Offered by someone you were not looking for. The worker had more. There was a woman named Jessie Becker. She was 35 years old. As a child, she had spent time at the Hazen farmhouse, near West Liberty. In the months after Corey Wienicke died, weekend sleepovers, the kind of visit children made without thinking. She was young enough that what she heard did not yet have a name, old enough that she knew it mattered. And she had never told any investigator. She was ready to talk now. 25 years is a specific kind of weight. Not forgetting, but carrying quietly through every year that passes and every year the case does not move. Corey Wienicke. Velita had never heard the name. He was about to hear everything. He wrote it down. Then Jessie Becker's name beside it. A cold case does not reopen because the detective goes looking. It reopens because someone decides finally that the silence is heavier than the telling. Velita asked a few questions. He noted the details: West Liberty, the Hazen farmhouse, 1992, a child who listened and said nothing for 25 years. 2 names on a single page. 1 murder. A quarter century of open air. The corridor was ordinary around him. Fluorescent light, the sound of equipment somewhere down the hall. People moving through their days, none of them knowing that a 24-year-old case had just shifted. He had come to the hospital for something else. He was leaving with this. Jessie Becker had been at that farmhouse. She had heard something. She had held it through childhood and into adulthood, and now she was ready to hand it over. He was going to find her. Jessie Becker had been waiting 25 years for someone to ask her the right question. She sat across from Velita in the interview room on December 15, 2017. She was not nervous. That was the first thing he noticed, the quiet in her hands, the steadiness. She had the composure of someone who had spent years deciding what to do and had finally decided. She told him about the farmhouse night. She had been 9 years old. It was a weekend, sleepover ordinary, the kind of visit that should leave no mark. She woke sometime in the night. She could not say what woke her. The house had the wrong kind of quiet, too still, as if the walls were holding something back. She climbed out of bed, went to the stairs, and stopped at the bottom. There was light in the room below, not from any lamp she recognized. Candles. Black candles, arranged in a way she could not explain and had never been able to forget. She was 9 years old, and she did not know what she was seeing. She stood there. She looked, and then she saw the woman. Annette did not know she had an audience. That detail, small, accidental, would become the most important thing in the entire case. She was near the floor, her body folded inward, rocking. The crying came quietly at first, and then it didn't. Jessie did not move. She held her breath, and she listened. The way children listen when they understand, without being told, that what they are hearing is not meant for them. Black candles, a woman weeping, a child at the bottom of the stairs, holding her breath, listening. What Annette said that night. She said to the dark. She said it to the candles and the silence. She believed she was alone. She was not. Jessie told Velita that she had spent years trying to make sense of what she heard. As a child, the words had been too large for her. She had known they mattered, without knowing exactly why. By the time she grew old enough to understand what she had witnessed, years had already passed. Coming forward felt impossible. She told herself she would do it eventually, and then eventually stopped arriving. Now she looked at Velita across the table, and she repeated the words, every one of them. In the same order she had first heard them from the bottom of those stairs in 1992. 25 years had not softened a single one. The room went still. The confession Annette believed she made to no one, to candles and an empty house, had been absorbed by a 9-year-old who forgot nothing. Every word arrived intact, a quarter-century later, in an Iowa police interview room. Velita had a witness. He had words spoken in 1992 and remembered across 25 years. He had a case that had been silent for nearly a quarter-century, and it was about to be anything but. Velita needed one thing. Confirmation that Jessie had told someone else, back in 1992 before she could have known any better. A child who comes home from a sleepover carrying something frightening does not always stay quiet. Sometimes she tells her mother. Investigators tracked down Cindy Jessie's mother and asked her one question. What did your daughter say when she came home from the Hazen farmhouse in 1992? Cindy remembered. She had never stopped remembering. A 9-year-old does not compose a deathbed confession. Those words came from somewhere. She told investigators the scene her daughter had described, candles burning black, a woman on the floor, weeping. Words spoken into that dark room by someone who believed no one was listening. Jessie had come to her mother the following morning and repeated what she had heard, word for word, the way a frightened child does when something needs to go somewhere other than inside her. She could not have invented those words. She could not have known their meaning. Cindy had listened. She had not known what to do with it. The investigation was still moving, the case still open. And Jessie's account was the kind of thing that made sense only if you already understood what had happened in that farmhouse the night Corey Wienicke died. She had been a mother trying to make sense of something her 9-year-old daughter could not explain. She had sat with it. She had waited for someone to knock on her door. Nobody had. The years went on. The case went cold. The words stayed exactly where Jessie had put them. Now investigators were sitting across from her. She was ready to give them back. Two people, 25 years apart, the same words, in the same order, about the same man, and neither of them knew the other had been asked. Before we hear what Cindy gave investigators comment, the one question you most want this case to answer, because this next part is the moment it all comes together. A note: this story includes some details reconstructed for atmosphere, drawn from documented records. The testimony itself is real. Cindy's account matched Jesse's, not in spirit, not approximately, word for word.
Corey, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to kill you.
That was what Jesse had heard at the bottom of the stairs in 1992. Words that made no sense to a 9-year-old and complete sense to a grown woman looking back. That was what she had carried home and told her mother the following morning. Cindy had been holding those words for 25 years, without anyone asking. A confession made in private is still a confession. The question is only whether anyone was listening. Someone was. Annette had spoken into a room she believed was empty. It was not. A 9-year-old had been standing on the stairs, and she had gone home that morning and told her mother everything. 2 accounts, 1 confession. The case was alive again. They found her in Tipton, a different name, a different town. 26 years of ordinary life behind a door that opened when investigators knocked. Annette Cahill answered. She had been Annette Hazen when she lived near West Liberty in 1992. She was a different name now, in a different county, but the knock on her door brought the farmhouse with it. She sat down. She did not refuse to speak. Investigators conducted the first of 2 sessions. She told them about Corey, about what she had believed the relationship was, and where she had believed it was going. The week before he died, she said. They had been planning to leave West Liberty together, not someday, the following week. It was decided, in her telling. She and Corey were going to go. The life they had been living in separate directions was about to become one. She had given it a deadline. She was done with the waiting. Then came the night at the bar. She had been there. She had watched Corey leave with Wendy. She had watched him walk out with someone else on the week he was supposed to be walking out with her. The timeline the investigators had been rebuilding for months snapped into alignment. Annette had not walked into that farmhouse in blind rage on a random night in October 1992. She had gone there on the morning after watching Corey choose the week before what she had been certain was their shared departure. That gap between the future she believed had been decided and the choice she watched him make at the bar door was where the murder lived. In the interview room, she gave them the phrase, "Fish or cut bait, I was done being his secret." Fish or cut bait, she had decided. She just decided it with a bat. She had delivered an ultimatum. In her telling, Corey had agreed. And then, on the night that was supposed to confirm everything, he walked out of that bar with someone else. What followed, she told them, was not planning. Not premeditation, that was the word she chose, or avoided. What followed was grief. She had believed the future was fixed. She had watched it dissolve on the wrong side of a bar door. That was her account. Investigators record what suspects say. They also record what suspects choose not to say. The omissions are evidence too. Annette did not say she had not gone to the farmhouse that morning. She did not say she had not picked up the bat. She said she had been in grief. The interview closed. 2 sessions, 1 motive, her own words on record. Annette had lived quietly in Tipton for 26 years. She had a different name in a different county, a life constructed at some distance from what happened in October 1992. She had thought the distance was permanent. It was not. The investigators closed their notebooks. The quiet life in Tipton was over. The process that began when Velita closed his notebook in Tipton did not stop. It came back. In early 2018, Velita returned for the second interview, this time carrying something Annette had not seen coming. He put Jesse Becker's statement on the table between them. Annette had managed the first interview the way she had managed the previous 26 years, with composure. She had told them what she believed. She had framed it the way she wanted. She kept the distance she had always maintained between herself and the word that mattered most. She had been in grief, she said. What came next had been grief. Velita read her what Jesse had described. The farmhouse stairs, the black candles, a woman on the floor, weeping, speaking into the dark. The exact words, the ones a 9-year-old had taken home and told her mother the following morning. Two people, no contact between them, 25 years apart, the same account. Annette listened. The composure that had carried her through the first session was still visible, but something underneath it had shifted. She was hearing for the first time what a third party had witnessed. Not her version of events, not the account she had shaped and offered. Someone else had been at the farmhouse stairs that night, watching, listening, remembering. And now that account was on the table beside her. Velita did not push. He let the statement sit. She admitted she had cried that night. After watching Corey walk out of the bar with Wendy, she had wept. She was giving them a crack in the composure, the nearest she had come to anything that could be called acknowledgement, in 2 separate sessions. And then the wall went back up. She said she cried. And then she asked for a lawyer. The interview ended. Annette, who for 26 years had controlled every account of Corey Wienica's death, stopped talking mid-sentence. She invoked counsel. She ceded the room. The narrative had been hers to shape since the October morning she had walked out of that farmhouse. It was not hers anymore. Velita walked out with what he had 2 interviews, 1 motive, and a suspect who had just stopped talking. It was enough. The case went to a grand jury. The full record was placed before it, Jesse's account of the farmhouse stairs, Cindy's corroboration of the same words, Wendy's account of the bar that night. Annette's own words from the first session of Deadline, the ultimatum, the belief that a future had been decided. The grand jury considered everything. 26 years after Corey Wienica was found dead, the warrant was issued. A chance encounter in a hospital corridor in December 2017. A child who had carried a memory for 25 years. A mother who had held those exact words since the morning after a sleepover in 1992. The legal machinery had finally engaged 26 years late. Annette Cahill was going to be arrested. 26 years of distance had not been enough. May 31, 2018. Agents arrived at the Tipton home before noon. Annette Cahill came to the door. She looked at the warrant. She looked at the agents. She did not say a word. They arrested her on the front step of a house she had lived in for years, a different county. A different name for most of that time. A different life, built over the shape of what she had done. None of it had been enough. The charge was second-degree murder. The crime was 26 years old. Investigators had watched suspects talk themselves deeper into trouble for their entire careers. Annette did not do that. She said nothing at the door. She said nothing in the vehicle. She said nothing when she was processed. 26 years is a long time to practice a particular kind of silence. She was held at the Muscatine County Jail. Bond was set. She did not post it. An arrest does not resolve a case. It opens the formal phase of it. Everything that had been gathered, Jesse's account, Cindy's corroboration, Wendy's recollection, Annette's own admissions across 2 interviews would now have to survive a courtroom. 9 months passed. March 2019. The Muscatine County Courthouse. The case went to trial. Jessie Becker was called to testify. She was 9 years old when she crept to the top of the stairs in the Hazen farmhouse. She was in her 40s now. She sat in the witness chair, and she told the courtroom what she had heard. She had been carrying it for 26 years. She had told her mother. She had told an agent. Now she was telling 12 jurors, a judge, the press, and everyone seated in that gallery. Susan Winicky has waited 26 years to be in that room. She is in that room now. She sat in the gallery and listened to Jessie Becker describe what happened in that farmhouse the night her son drove away from a bar and never came home. Jessie's voice did not waver. She repeated the words she had heard Annette say alone. In the dark. In a room she believed was empty.
Corey, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to kill you.
Those words had been spoken once, in private, in grief, in the belief that no one was listening. They had traveled from one child's memory to her mother's kitchen table, to an agent's recorder, to a grand jury, and now to open court. They were on the record. They were public. They could not be unsaid. The jury deliberated. The verdict the jury returned would not close the case. It would force the state to try it a second time. The answer was still coming, but first it was going to get harder to reach. The jury went out, and the family that had waited 27 years sat down and waited one more time. They came back without a verdict. Not all 12 could agree. Jessie Becker had given them everything: the stairs, the dark, the candles, the words she had kept since she was 9 years old. She set it all down in front of them without flinching. It was not enough. Not for a unanimous decision, not for 12 people who needed to be certain. The judge declared a mistrial. The word passed through the courtroom quietly. Susan Winicky heard it from the gallery. She had buried her son in 1992. She had waited through years when the file sat untouched. Through the reopening, through an arrest, through a trial. Now she was being told that the jury could not agree that it was not over. A hung jury does not say the defendant is innocent. It says 12 people could not find their way to the same answer. There is a specific cruelty in that. The case had evidence. It had a confession witnessed by a child. It did not have the one thing it needed. Jessie had taken the stand. She had said the words and sat back down. She had done everything that was asked of her. The jury had heard her, and the jury had not agreed. The judge thanked the jurors and released them. The courtroom began to empty. People moved for the door and collected their things. The room that had taken 27 years to reach went quiet. Outside those courthouse doors, the case was not finished with her. The prosecution had held something back. For now, the steps outside the courthouse were hers. Annette Cahill walked out of the courthouse. Again. In 1992, a polygraph had given her room, and the case had stalled. Now a hung jury gave her room again. Different courthouse, different decade. The law had reached and come back without her. The prosecution did not close the file. There was a witness who had not been called at the first trial. He had not taken the stand. He had not raised his hand or spoken a word in any proceeding connected to this case. His name was Scott Payne. He was 54 years old. At some point, at a time and in a place the investigation had documented, Annette had spoken to him. What she said to him was different from what Jessie Becker had overheard on those stairs. A separate moment, a separate disclosure. The first trial had one witness. The second trial would have two. Scott Payne had not yet been asked to speak. The second trial would ask him. Susan Winicky had one more wait ahead of her. She had been doing this for 27 years. One more jury, one more courtroom. One more chance for the case to give her the word she had not yet heard. That answer was close. It was not here yet. The second trial had been scheduled. The prosecution was building again, working with what the first trial had not been enough to deliver. The investigation had always known there were people in West Liberty who remembered that week. Most of them had been asked. One of them had not. The break that the second trial needed did not come from a detective.
She had lit black candles, and she was crying, and she said, "I'm so sorry, Corey. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to kill you."
The way people do when someone is gone. The kind of gathering where old stories surface because everyone there is already thinking about what was lost. The conversation turned to Corey, the way it still could in West Liberty, even after all those years. And then a name came up. Scott Payne. Someone said it the way names get spoken at a gathering like that. Not a secret, not a revelation, just a piece of information that had been sitting somewhere for a long time. He had been at the Hazen farm the morning Corey died. He had been there and seen something. He had never told investigators. Susan Winicky heard the name. She held it the way you hold something when you sense it matters but are not yet sure why. Then she carried it back to the people who needed it. The investigation had spoken to neighbors, friends, bar patrons, people who had known Corey and people who barely did. The list had never been complete. Payne's name had not been on it. What a witness carries for 27 years is not always what they intended to keep. Sometimes a person waits to be found. Sometimes they wait for someone to tell them it is time. Payne contacted investigators. He was there, on that day, at that farm, and no one had ever asked him. He was 54 now. He sat across from investigators and said he was ready to tell them what he saw. He had been at the Hazen farm on the morning of October 13, 1992. He had not come forward in 27 years. He was coming forward now. That morning would later become the center of the prosecution's timeline. Records had been produced in the first trial to account for where Annette had been. Payne had been at the farm. He had seen something. Whatever he had seen had been sitting with him since the summer Corey Wienerke did not come home. The investigators listened. They wrote it down. What he told them next would reach somewhere the first trial could not. An eyewitness to the morning of October 13, 1992, someone who had been standing on that property, had not existed in this case until this moment. Every investigation has a fact it did not know it needed. This was that fact. He was the second voice. The first trial had never heard him. The second trial would. The interview room was quiet on July 29, 2019. Payne had spent years working in a slaughterhouse. That background, that particular knowledge was going to matter in everything he said next. He sat across from investigators and began to talk about the morning of October 13, 1992. He had been at the Hazen farm when Annette arrived. She had a brown paper sack. She did not stop to speak to anyone. She went directly to the burn barrel at the edge of the yard and emptied the sack into it. Clothes. She lit the barrel and stood there while the fire took them. Payne stood in the yard and watched. That is the thing about a witness who stays silent. They never make the list. The investigation moves around them for years, never finding them because no one knows look. He did not ask her anything that morning. He was standing in a yard that was not his.
The house wasn't trashed. The house wasn't burglarized. There wasn't tables and chairs overturned. So I think the motive was very specific.
Watched the fire take the clothes and he did not speak. But he understood what he was looking at before the flames had been going a minute. The clothes had a stain on them, a specific color, a specific weight when the fabric moved. Not dirt, not grease, something darker, heavier, something that came from inside a body rather than from the ground. He knew the smell of it hitting fire. He had stood at stations where blood was a daily condition of the work, on tools, on aprons, on everything. He knew what it looked like dried into cloth. He knew what it did to a flame. He had known since that morning in October 1992 exactly what Annette was burning. What he had seen had not...
And that eventually those leads stopped coming in. And that's when the case went cold.
The color, not the barrel or the sack, or the way she stood there while the fire
He saw her dumping clothes into a burn barrel. They had blood on them.
burned. Jackie's receipts said Iowa City. Scott Payne said the burn barrel. One of them is lying. The alibi documents from the first trial had placed Annette away from the farm that morning. Receipts associated with Jackie Hazen claimed she was in Iowa City. But Payne had been standing in the yard when she arrived. That account now sat beside an eyewitness, his eyes, his memory, his silence, now broken. The investigators wrote it all down. In the second trial, Payne would take the stand. He would say under oath what he had told them in that room. He would describe the sack, the barrel, the clothes, the fire. And then he would say it plainly. I used to work at a slaughterhouse. I knew what I was looking at. A man who spent years doing that work does not mistake what he saw. He had carried the knowledge since October 13, 1992. He had not been asked. He had not volunteered it. Now it was in a room, on the record, and the second trial had what it needed. The second trial had what the first one lacked. A woman who heard a confession and a man who watched the evidence burn. September 2019, the Muscatine County Courthouse again. The same gallery, the same defense table, the same weight of a case that had already survived a hung jury and a quarter-century of waiting. But this time the prosecution called 2 witnesses instead of 1. Jessie Becker took the stand first. She had done this before. She sat in the chair and repeated what she had heard on those stairs in 1992. The same words, in the same order, that she had carried for 27 years. The jury heard what the farmhouse had once absorbed. A woman, alone in the dark, speaking to a room she thought was empty. The first trial had rested entirely on those words, and those words had not been enough. Then Scott Payne took the stand. He described the brown paper sack. He described the burn barrel at the edge of the yard. He described the clothes going in and the fire taking them. He described what his years of slaughterhouse work had told him that stain was. He was calm. He was precise. He had not forgotten a detail. 2 witnesses. 2 separate moments from October 1992. One on a farmhouse staircase in the dark. One in a yard in the morning light. Susan Winicky sat in the gallery and listened. She had been in this room before. She had heard the jury announce it could not agree. She had walked back out of a courthouse and waited one more time. She was not going to wait anymore. Annette sat at the defense table. She had been in this position before. A jury had failed to agree on her once. The same room, the same charge, and now a second witness who had been standing in the yard that morning. The prosecution rested its case. The jury went out. Susan Winicky sat down, and, for the last time, she waited. The jury came back on September 19, 2019. The courtroom was quiet when they filed in. Annette watched from the defense table. She had been here before, in this chair, under this charge. The first jury had not been enough to stop what was coming now. The gallery was still. She watched the 4-person stand. Guilty. The word landed in that courtroom on September 19, 2019, and it did not undo anything. It did not bring Corey back. It did not return the 27 years the family had waited. It did not restore what had been lost before Corey ever left that bar. But it was the word the case owed them. 2 trials. A cold case and a reopened file. A child on a staircase. A man who knew what blood looked like on burning cloth. And 12 people who reached the same place at the same time. Guilty of second-degree murder. Annette Cahill would be sentenced. The verdict could not be undone. 27 years, answered in a single word. Annette Cahill was sentenced for the murder of Corey Wienerker. The case that began in a bar in West Liberty, Iowa in 1992 had arrived at its end. Susan Winicky still goes to Winks. The same bar. The same door that swings inward when you push it. The same stools along the counter. The same low light. She pushes through that door, and she sits down, and Corey is not behind the counter. He would have been here every evening. The bartender who worked the same shifts until this bar became the last place anyone saw him alive. Investigators had come through that same door asking questions. His mother had gone back there eventually, because West Liberty is not a large town, and Winks is still open. She knows the bar without him. She knows what it means to sit at a counter where he once poured drinks. She says plainly, it is not closure. Closure is the wrong word for what a verdict gives a family. A verdict says what happened. It does not give back what was taken. The bar has not changed the way some places never do. The windows, the signs, the low light in the afternoon before the evening crowd arrives. She goes there and the world continues its ordinary business, and Corey is missing from all of it. He was 25 years old when he last walked out of those doors. She has added the years herself, in her head, the way a mother does and cannot stop. He would have laughed at things she does not know about. He would have had opinions about things that happened after 1992. None of that happened. He would have known things she will never know. He would be in his 50s now. Susan knows exactly how old. What the verdict gave Susan was not him back. It was something more precise in acknowledgement, documented and legally binding. What happened to her son was a crime. The person responsible had been named. Annette Cahill had stood at a burn barrel that morning and believed the evidence was gone. She had sat on a farmhouse floor with candles burning. She wept for the man she had killed and believed she was alone. The dark
You know, I don't like the word closure. It gives you peace of mind. It's never closure because it doesn't bring my son back.
empty. A 9-year-old was at the top of the stairs. She heard every word. That child grew up. She became a woman who remembered. She waited to be asked. When the question finally came, what she said had been exactly preserved inside her since she was 9 years old. Corey Wienecke worked behind the counter at Winks. He was a bartender who poured drinks for the same town, evening after evening. Until he wasn't. He had a shift to get to. A life still in progress. This is where his mother still comes. She thought she was confessing to the dark. The dark grew up, and 25 years later, it spoke. Corey Wienecke deserved to be remembered as more than a cold case file. He was 25 years old. He worked behind a bar in a small Iowa town, and people liked being around him. What happened to him on October 13, 1992 should have been answered long before 2019. It wasn't, because the person responsible believed silence was permanent. What this case leaves behind is not a warning about cold cases. It is a reminder that the people closest to a crime carry what they witnessed for the rest of their lives. Jesse Becker carried it for more than 2 decades. The weight of that is not something to move past quickly. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below and share what you are thinking. Subscribe if you haven't already. Stories like this take time to research and present carefully, and your support makes that possible. Share this with someone who follows true crime, or someone who needs to know that these cases do eventually close. This story is based on a real case. Some scenes have been dramatized to reflect the emotional reality of documented events, but the names, dates, and facts are drawn from court records and public reporting. To the Wienecke family, and to everyone who kept asking questions for 27 years, this story was told with respect.